Hello, team. I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode. It's going to be with our next guest, Dr. Austin Chiang. Dr. Austin Chiang is a gastroenterologist. He's also the founding president of the Association for Healthcare Social Media. And we dig into a lot about social media during this conversation. Specifically, we focus in on TikTok because it is such a popular platform right now. And I think that we're, as a profession, underutilizing the power of social media. And what we talk about in this conversation is that it is a very strong way to educate the public health. So without further ado, let's get into the episode for today with Dr. Austin Chiang. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Doc. I am so excited. I'm super pumped for our next guest, Dr. Austin Chiang. He is a gastroenterologist. He just does so much. I see you all over the place in a very good way. And I love what you do with your work. So I'm excited to talk to you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Great. So to start us off, what got you interested in medicine?
Oh, I feel like I had the benefit of having a few physicians in my family. And so I have two cousins who, one of whom is an ophthalmologist, one of whom is a plastic surgeon. And my grandfather was a surgeon in the World War II era. And so that medicine has sort of been in the family. And then growing up, I think my parents were paid attention to, getting me involved in volunteering activities and things like that. And so it really just ended up being like a good combination between my interest in science and that sort of experience that I've had, and bringing it together. And it really fit my personality, I think, the best of all the different options I was considering. So I think that along the way, I've always kept an open mind about the possibilities of what I wanted to do. But I think that's how I ended up pursuing medicine.
Yeah, that's great. So did you ever have along the journey where you think of any other fields or any other kind of specialties?
Oh, totally. I mean, before deciding on medicine, I thought, maybe I'd be interested in doing something like architecture or something music related, because I grew up also playing the violin and just being interested in all sorts of music. So I had that kind of interest as well. And ultimately, when I went to college, I was a bio major, but a music minor. And then along the way, I kept an open mind as soon as I entered med school of all the different possibilities of, a career path. So I thought at one point I was going to do neurology, plastic surgery, ortho. I really ran the entire gamut, and then ultimately decided on internal medicine, mainly because of my experience working with the residents. But then I really also long for that procedural aspect of things. So ultimately in residency, I was actually made my decision very late. I thought I was going to do pulmonary critical care, cardiology, and then figured out that, GI seemed to be the best fitting specialty.
Yeah. And GI fellowship is how long?
It's 3 years after a 3-year medicine residency.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big undertaking, right? So you've already prolonged, kind of your life for, we go into this, right? 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school. You went into IM. So that was 3 years. And then you did another 3, right? So what is that? Like 8, 11, 14 years?
But I actually tacked on even more.
Okay, go on.
So during my 3-year GI fellowship, I was fortunate to have the fellowship structured in a way that I actually did another fellowship during that 3 years. And I got a master's in public health at the same time. And then I did another 4th-year fellowship after that. So I did a 3rd fellowship in advanced endoscopy. So my subspecialty is really in advanced endoscopy within GI.
Amazing. And GI obviously is still very general, and you had that opportunity for another, subspecialty. So, right. And that allows you to be a true specialist in something. And, of course, as medicine is just so broad now that you have something that differentiates you and lets you have a skill set that other people don't.
Totally. I mean, I think that was the sort of mentality that I kept, was I really wanted to be an expert in something very specific. And that's what led me down the path of like just seeking more and more training.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think, where I'm at now, I'm working in an academic center. It makes sense that I had to go through all that training and the fact that now I'm working in an academic center lends itself to being in something so specific.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's amazing. And you have a tremendous amount of training then. And I think that leads itself very nicely to, you mentioned you have that public health training as well. Internal medicine is the bread and butter of what it means to really be a physician, I would say, alongside like family medicine, for example, or, any of the other general fields. And then you also have that specialized training. So I think it actually leads really nicely to what you were saying before, which is you also have that creative side of yourself and of your life. And you do so much teaching through social media. So can you like talk about a little bit of your journey, going not just from the educational standpoint, but now like what got you so interested in social media?
Yeah, I mean, early on in medical training, I realized that our patients aren't really getting their medical information from our really brief clinical encounters. I realized that it was really that they were getting their information from everywhere else, all sorts of media, whether it's traditional media and, of course, more so social media these days. And so I actually, in seeking kind of how medical information gets to the general public, I spent some time during my residency at ABC News. And I wanted to see how exactly, the things that were being published in medical journals were being vetted to end up on the evening news. So during my residency, I spent some time there. And at the time, they were also using Twitter to host Twitter chats. And this was years ago. And at the time, I started noticing that there were a lot of relevant, important public figures who were joining in the chat, a lot of big organizations that were contributing. And so I thought, okay, let me try to use this productively in my own field. And at the time, there were probably less than 5 academic GI people on Twitter. And I started, live tweeting conferences, and I tried to set up a Twitter page for my division, and ran into a lot of red tape.
How many years ago is this? Just for
this was about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and so at the time, I was being made fun of for using social media in this way. And I tried to set up a Twitter account for my division. I was at Brigham and Women's for GI training, and as you can probably imagine, Harvard was having none of it, and they shut down the Twitter account the next day. And so it ended up being this whole journey of trying to justify the importance of social media in medicine. So I started doing research in social media using social media data and looking at a variety of different things, whether it's how people were tweeting at medical conferences, how journals were putting out their content. And ultimately, because of all this research and this involvement, I am now basically involved in all the major GI societies, helping in social media in various ways, which is really great.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what led me to both my position here at Jefferson as well as this whole organization.
Right. I mean, that's beautiful. And it's so funny. You're talking about like 6 or 7 years ago with social media. And now the world of, physicians and social media, we've really caught up to the general public. And I think it honestly being very open, very accepted in general. I do feel like there is a good amount of being conservative. There is definitely a lot of fear around that. I know when I started the podcast, I was telling you before we started the interview, 3 years ago, I was scared because I was applying to residencies. And I was like, crap, what happens if they see the podcast and what our residency is going to think about it? So that did come up in the back of my mind. I don't think it's fair. And I'm sure we can talk about a little bit about content, but in my mind, I was like, well, I'm putting out positive content. I'm putting something that's informational. I'm putting something out that's helpful. I don't see how that's going to be taken negatively, but there's still a lot of fear in there. Do you do a lot of teaching around, how to work through the mindset of social media and producing good content?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that everyone has a different purpose for being on social media, and depending on the platform, whether it's, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, podcasting, there's so many different purposes. And so, yeah, it really depends on what every individual's goal is. And depending on the platform, whether it's podcasting or YouTube or Instagram or Twitter, there are a lot of different ways to go about, delivering that purpose, and exactly how receptive the institution is to that kind of a use. And sometimes it involves me actually reaching out and providing some evidence in some ways of what productive use looks like. And I think it's difficult. It's difficult to ascertain exactly what's acceptable and what's not, because every institution has their own kind of litmus test for this. And I think that just really depends on the institution, because they often will see it. I think the reason why it can be nerve-wracking is that often institutions will portray it as a liability to them. And so really some really just want to make sure that you're not saying anything wrong, but some really want to make sure that, you're not using it for any purpose aside from something productive. So I think there's just so much variability.
Right. So, you mentioned purpose and, kind of delivering that purpose effectively. I mean, it's kind of a deep question, but what is the purpose for you? What are your goals for doing the work that you do in social media?
I think ultimately it's about education and improving health literacy in some way. I think, and that kind of goes hand in hand with who exactly my audience is. And I have always wanted my audience to be the general public. I think it's great that on a lot of platforms, the people I interact with and my audience is a lot of health professionals, but really my ultimate goal is to reach the general public. So it varies, some people want to only build a network of health professionals. Some want to reach the public, and some don't want to use it for education like I do. Some people want to use it to build their practice or advertise or build a side gig, and which is totally fine. I don't think that there's anything that in my book is technically unacceptable. It's just that, we have to be kind of clear about what our purpose is.
Yeah. So with the general public, I mean, often I find, like, for example, Twitter, it's very easy to identify, if it's a health professional, or I don't really think, honestly, on Twitter, I hit a lot of general public. Facebook's probably the same. Instagram, you get a lot of the general public. I feel like that there's a large, broad interaction of different individuals. TikTok, though, and, TikTok's been super up and coming. I would love to talk about TikTok, specifically because obviously it didn't really hit any of the older demographic. Anyone above essentially, like, I don't know, older than a teenager would not have done this at all. And now it's just crazy how much it's blown up recently. So what are your thoughts on TikTok? And obviously you make so many videos. So what are your thoughts on that? And what are you doing on there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that of all these platforms, for me, it's been the most successful in terms of reaching a general audience, because you're absolutely right. Like on Twitter, it's so siloed. It's all, the health conversations are all within the professional community, that it's hard to reach anyone else, and which is fine because I use those platforms in different ways. I use Twitter really to communicate with my colleagues and have academic discussions and talk about those sorts of current events. On TikTok, the way the platform is built, I think, lends itself so well to reaching the general public, because it's not about just seeing content from people you follow or people associated with the people you follow. It's content from anyone. And as long as it's engaging and well liked, that could potentially reach a different audience and different people that you otherwise wouldn't be exposed to your content. So that's why I see value in it now. I understand that there's a lot of concerns about privacy and the whole origins of TikTok as an app. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, millions of people are on the app, and even if it means that it's a younger generation for the most part, the younger generation is our future, Yeah. And if we can pass along some important health messages early on, I think that that's also really valuable.
Yeah. And, the thing with TikTok that's a little bit strange is, and I just find it unusual, as opposed to other platforms. For example, my one friend, Adam, he just made a video. He's still a med student. He did a surgical knot tying.
Yeah.
And it looked like the video was like visually appealing. It had like a nice little song in the background. And that video blew up and it got into like, I think 1.2 million views, 1.5 million views, something like that, right? Completely by accident. He was messing around with TikTok. He was trying to figure it out and it just blew up. And I know some of your videos have done that as well. Can you describe maybe a video that has, for some reason, just worked?
Well, one of my recent videos was centered around how long coronavirus can stay on surfaces, based on a New England Journal paper. And I sort of utilized an audio that was trending and a dance that was trending. And I kind of portrayed it in a way that I thought would be fun and engaging. And sure enough, people liked it. And I think it got maybe close to 3 million views.
Amazing.
And, I think that's what I'm hoping for, is that, some just really, and there wasn't a whole lot of complicated explaining that I was doing there. There are definitely videos that I do that I know are not going to be well received by a lot of people because it's a little too dense, it's a little too complex, but something like that, I was like, this is probably effective and gets like a really simple message across. So yeah, some of it, you have a gut feeling that, it's going to work. But I mean, the suturing thing, I've actually seen a couple of videos like that, and it's surprising how interested the public is in something as simple as that.
Yeah. It's very strange. I think one of the fears I have on TikTok, well, it actually happened, by the way. I was still messing around with it. You don't know this. I have actually a gymnastics background. I love working out.
Cool.
And so that's something that sometimes I do. So I had a video with me just doing a really long handstand, and I had another video of me just working out. And then one of my coworkers comes up to me. By the way, the video did not get that many views. Like it was like a few thousand or something. And one of my coworkers like, I saw you on TikTok. And I'm like, oh, and I just like, it's like, I'm still figuring it out. So I think there's that weird kind of sense that it really is public. It is out there.
Yes. And it definitely reaches the reaches of the public is really interesting because it's reached people that, coworkers, kids, family members who otherwise don't follow me on any other sort of social media platform have contacted me and said that, oh my gosh, you showed up on my kid's phone. And so it's a little bizarre.
Yeah, it is bizarre. And I'm seeing like Jason Derulo on there now, and you're getting a little bit of his life and stuff. It's just fun. But I think you need to know that anything that's on there is completely available. So I think it's interesting.
And I think, I actually want to point out that one of the best things about that, and I know that there are critics out there who are not huge fans of the fact that a lot of these TikToks are put to music, or that there are dances involved, or or there's humor involved. But a lot of comments that I get really are, you guys are humanizing, the medical field. I feel like you're a lot more approachable. I don't feel as nervous about going to see somebody about certain things. So I think that there's value to that too.
100%. Actually, you just, you sparked an idea in my mind, which is, I think often, and you talked about it earlier, you had 14 plus years of specialized training. Medicine is very hierarchical. You've spent a tremendous amount of time learning very specific knowledge. I mean, it's arguable that you're in the top, 1 percentile plus in that field, right? Because of just how much time you've spent there. You have to humanize. I mean, if your goal is to take that specialized knowledge and then impart the wisdom, what other way is there than to come back to earth and humanize that knowledge? I mean, I think that's been a major problem. Not that it doesn't have its place, but the hierarchy definitely makes it difficult for us to get off of our ivory tower, so to speak, and come back down and teach people that really need to know it.
I think, you bring up a really great point. And I think one example is that some of the procedures that I do are are complicated, are not well known, and some of them are actually elective procedures. So it'd be great if patients who wanted them could come in and get them. But first of all, our field isn't really great at marketing typically these elective procedures. We're not dermatology or plastic surgery or some of these other fields that are very accustomed to doing things like this. And so getting the word out is really difficult through traditional marketing methods. And yet there are also very few people, very few doctors in the country who do some of these procedures as well. So how else can we get the word out there? And which has been really nice for me to get the word out about these specific procedures that I know otherwise people wouldn't learn about.
Sure.
And you're right. Medicine now is just so super specialized that sometimes, and I get this a lot, like a lot of patients on there have very specific conditions and they want to learn more, and they're always like trying to find more information. And sometimes it's so specific that they're just really trying to find somebody who knows a little bit about it. So yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of different reasons why I'm on there, and some of which I didn't realize until I've actually spent some time on the app.
Yeah. So just for fun, if you could give me a dummy's guide, right? Like it doesn't have to even be a physician. It could be anyone. But like, what are a couple of key characteristics or things that you think of that give you that sense that it might be something that'll hit on TikTok, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I've truly thought through it in a very methodical way.
Yeah.
A lot of it is like Gestalt, but I think it's got to be like really simple messaging, and it's often the type of question that people will, that you get asked a lot about, and you have like a simple answer to, or it's something really novel and fresh, like this whole idea of like how long does SARS-CoV-2 stay on a surface that otherwise isn't also being super well publicized, but it's interesting. And I know I get lots of questions about that. And also just the delivery of it. If it's a dance, it's funny because the way that specific TikTok actually has this like weird squeaky noise. And so I thought, I'm going to like wipe down a surface every time that squeaky noise happens.
Right.
And so that's kind of what made it click.
I think I know the sound. It goes,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that worked really well. And, there have been other videos that have been successful that I don't know why they're successful. And there have been videos that I thought would be successful that totally bombed. So, but that one is the one that comes to mind that I had a feeling that was going to work.
I think the other one that was really popular that I saw of you personally was the glow up one, where it kind of looks like you're like drab and you're like tired, and then you like lift your arms and you bring it down, then you transform into that like attending and you look great, right?
Yeah.
I think everyone's looking for that hero, and
I'm surprised that you remember that, because so long ago. And it's funny because I think part of it is everyone likes a good glow up or a good, makeover story. But that one also came at a time that was earlier in I think now that everyone's formed TikTok.
Right.
That content at the time, I think what was really novel and fresh. I think if something else like that was done again, it probably wouldn't work again. But yeah, I remember that, now that I see everything that's on there, I'm like, well, that probably doesn't stand out quite as much now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd be surprised. Like I'm constantly inspired by the creativity that some of these high schoolers have, and it's awesome to see like what they're doing on there. Some of it, is questionable.
Sure.
Some of it is like really, really creative.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that, and I like talking about TikTok because I've talked about other platforms. I think we all get how Instagram works. Put a beautiful photo up, have a nice messaging. It's going to work, right? Twitter, you're going to have some short, engaging conversation. Facebook, usually a nice long post, whatever. We get it. But I think the interesting thing about TikTok, and what I think is fun about it, is you just have literally infinite creative possibilities within the 60 seconds. And people will promote creative work and people promote things that are like positive and fresh and interesting. And you have to be creative because, like you said, now if you were to make that same video, people know they know the previous trend.
Right.
I think something else that you brought up that I've noticed just from like observing is a lot of people like to hop on those trends, but you hop on the trend with a different spin.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love about, especially someone like you, because a lot of, and we talked about before with the conservative nature of things, I think the huge opportunity for physicians, and I know you're going to agree with this, is because we're so conservative, there's not many people speaking up. So when you do have a legitimate, trained, specialized physician, and you take that opportunity to like, hit into like a TikTok move or whatever, right? Like if you take the time to actually make a nice video, it's going to go far.
Yeah, no, and it's very interesting how quickly this app, I think, is being embraced. Because back when I was fighting the battles with Twitter years ago, it's taken years to really catch on. And likewise, a couple months ago, because I've only been on there for 6 months, maybe.
Sure.
When I started out, people were making fun of me, and it is kind of like at times ridiculous and funny and silly, but now people are seeing value in it because you're reaching this different audience, and you're totally right about like lending legitimacy to things. That's really important to me, which is part of the reason why I really thought that me and a couple of my colleagues decided to come together and start that whole association for healthcare social media. I think I'm in a really unique position having a formal title at a major teaching institution in social media. The title they gave me was Chief Medical Social Media Officer. But that, along with all of my involvement with societies, I think, and then the fact that, I've done all this training and I really do know a lot of the thought leaders personally, I think that sort of legitimacy is really important because it really helps other institutions and other groups see that, someone who cares about their day job just as much is able to do this. And we kind of need spokespeople like us to, put the word out about our respective fields. Otherwise, who's going to do it for us,
100%. And it sounds like you're really busy, right? Because you have a real job, right? You're doing a lot of procedures and all those things specific to GI, and then you come home, and I know you're making a lot of these videos. I can see in the background you have a great light setup. It looks like, but the one thing I often find, and tell me if I'm wrong, but this is the happy doc, right? And we want to have fulfilled, energized, happy physicians. And it's my personal belief when we're excited about what we do, it allows us to impart, more effectively to our patients. And I see a lot of nodding. So I think we're on the same team there. Do you find that it's exhausting to do the creative work, or do you find it actually be more of something that energizes you and allows you to do more things?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it if it didn't energize me. And I think that everyone has a different capacity for this sort of thing. I have grown up with social media, as I'm sure you have. And, social media has always been a huge interest of mine, which is why I'm on all these platforms. But you're right. Like, there are moments where it's like too much and I have to take a step back and not care about all the intricacies quite as much. And, there's a very calculated way that you can go about posting and things like that. And a lot of that I've thrown out the window because I just don't have time. And you're right. Like, and when people ask me about wanting to get involved in social media, I try to caution them that, like, to the extent that I'm doing it and that you're doing it and a lot of other folks that we know are doing it, it might be too much and it's not right for everyone. Some people just, want to dabble a little bit and then they realize that that's not for them at all, which is perfectly fine. And so it just is a matter of like which platform clicks the most with them. Does it really bring them joy? If not, then don't bother, like, I think that it's not meant for everyone and it's okay.
Yeah. My personal litmus test for this type of work has always been, I never wanted to create another job. I wanted to have something that was fun. And as soon as the work started to feel like a job, I knew that I needed to like slow down, because I was really pushing to get this to be a daily podcast. I was really pushing, I don't know, I'm a little more aggressive with it, but I was really pushing to kind of like do it, because there is a part of me that has that business sense and wants to do a good job, wants to promote. At the end of the day, though, I already have a job.
Exactly.
I don't want another job. I want to have fun. I want to have play. You mentioned music. Like I play piano. You said violin. Like I think there's a part of us that just wants to play music, that wants to have that, to get the creativity out, get the energy out, go on the dance floor and be stupid, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's often when I have these conversations, by the way, about happiness and physicians, I think that's what it is. We need to massage the right side of the brain. We need to get the creativity and the juices flowing. It sounds like that's kind of working for you pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a careful balance, I think that there are moments where I'm really into social media, and there are moments where, the day job really, I have to focus on that. And that's part of also, the reason why I stay in the day job for me is that I really feel like it's important for me, if I'm using these platforms for education of the public, that I still maintain that credibility. And plus I'm doing procedures, so there's really no great way to like dial back on that. But yeah, there are moments, I've definitely had moments where there's just too much going on. If you think about like Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all at once, and something has to give. And so it's been a while, for instance, since I've last uploaded on YouTube, because it's just so time consuming. I don't have someone helping me out managing all these things. And I know some people do, and that's great, but I was doing all the editing myself and everything, and it was just too much. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on these things. And if I can get back to those, then that's great. So we just kind of have to find a balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy promoting, doing work for yourself in a different area when, we think about physicians. It's a busy job. It's no joke, It is no joke. We generally wake up earlier than most people and we work later than most people. And then on top of that, you add in social media. If you want to have a family, if you want to have a significant other, it's no joke. So I think you're doing it very successfully. And I think that's one of the reasons, I'm excited to have you on and speak to you. Is there anything you felt like during this conversation, something that you're passionate about, maybe we haven't touched on, you wanted to spread that message about?
Ooh, about social media. There's just so much, because it's interesting, like social media really does define my public presence, but so much of what I do is like on the clinical end of things. And, I have research and I have like all these other aspects to my day job. And yeah, I'm just trying to, as much as it looks like I'm in control of a lot of it, it sometimes is just a matter of trying to get as much done as possible. And yeah, I think that, right now we're going through a really interesting time with COVID-19, and seeing how I'm using social media to my advantage in some ways, whether it's educating general public about the condition and all the updates that we're getting on a daily basis, or communicating with colleagues as well. And one thing that I think just comes to mind, it's because it's at the forefront of everything that I'm doing right now, is I happen to start getting really involved with trying to figure out what the boundaries are in terms of involving trainees on the front lines, because it's sort of become like a little passion project of mine right now, because of so many issues that I'm hearing about with people, trainees being deployed to the front lines ahead of some other attendings, who, should probably also be there.
Yeah.
And the fact that people are being fast-tracked from traineehood into attendinghood without fair compensation for what they're doing now. And, it's a really uncertain time, but these are the sorts of things that I've tried to raise awareness about. And so we're in the process, actually, from a GI end of things. Like I know that we are likely going to be putting out a statement of some sort from the leaders of our GI societies, coming together to talk about exactly like what trainees should and shouldn't be doing.
Right.
So, and that's great, because the whole reason why I have access to some of the leadership of these societies is because of my social media presence,
right?
Because they want me to get the messaging out to the rest of our colleagues and others.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's been good. And I think that, the other thing I probably want to emphasize is that social media should just be an extension of like our usual daily life. It shouldn't be too much more of a separate thing. I think that what I mean by that is the relationships that you cultivate with other people are real and are very fruitful oftentimes. And I think that that's something that I can't imagine, like, if I had started practicing and been in this without social media, how limited I would feel without those sorts of connections,
100%. I mean, you brought up some great points. Enough points in there that I could honestly, like, we could have a whole podcast on the moral, ethical, and decision-making, criteria and things of that nature around the deployment, around PPE, around what's right and what's wrong. There's so many things that, I mean, I hate to say it, there's a lot of disturbing things that are also coming out too about what's happening on the front lines right now.
Yeah.
And we're making some really tough decisions based on lack of protection. But there's so much there, right? And then you brought up a great point also, specifically about the involvement of social media. I think about the people on Instagram where their photos just look too good. You know what I mean? And that raises its own set of issues, which we never even touched on. But like, how do we, I love the idea though that you basically brought up, which is make it authentic. Don't make it too ridiculous. Keep it close to home, and don't, stretch yourself too thin with the whole work.
Yeah, I think, social media is interesting because a lot of it is kind of, you see, especially like certain platforms lend itself better or worse to this sort of issue. You see pictures and you have a perception of what someone is like. And I think I learned early on when I first, met some of these big influencer type people, that how they present themselves online wasn't exactly how they are in real life, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that sometimes those photos are so like curated, but in real life they have just the same concerns that you and I have, and their approach is like the same, and their morals are the same, and so it doesn't. After learning that, I think I felt more comforted by the fact that these people are real, and they're still doctors, and they're cool people, but they're just so much. I mean, it's really introduced a whole new world and a new side of medicine that I know is being studied heavily. And part of why it's amazing is because it's covers so much ground and it's so uncertain. But with that comes a lot of like gray areas. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why we set up this association, was in hopes that we could better define like what was okay and what's not, and how to best use it. Because I know that people can use it responsibly and do all that and understand the ethics and boundaries, but how do we reach a audience effectively? Because you and I know there are people on there who are so successful in getting the message out and developing a community, and that should be taught to more people, because we don't come out of med school with any sort of like marketing or any sort of like communications knowledge at all.
Right. I mean, look, before, way back when, you needed to have a physical sign next to your practice. You need to have the phone number or what have you. You need to send out the letters. But now that physical sign has become a digital sign. You need to have your website. You need to have different platforms. You need to be engaging. So people do know where your clinic is. People do know that you're knowledgeable. People do know that they can like and trust you. So these are skills that you need in 2020. I was also going to say now, think about the Spanish flu 100 years ago. If you had a quarantine, what would you do in the house?
I was thinking that the other day too. I was like, oh my gosh, like without all the tools that we have now, without, your streaming services, your cell phone, like you would just be staring at the wall, it seems.
I know. I hate to say it like this, but if there was a time it needed to happen, at least I got Netflix, I got Instagram, I got some TikTok videos. I have the opportunity to have massive amounts of learning and I'm chilling on my couch.
And social engagement, because otherwise it's so isolating.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same. I mean, you and I know that, but with that being said, it's still a form of engagement.
Yeah, totally.
So it's very interesting times. Obviously, I hope that everyone stays safe and we get through this as successfully as possible.
Yeah. Are you being affected a lot by it? Is it affecting like your training?
Personally, so in psychiatry, we luckily are doing a lot of telepsych right now. Okay. I also do work in the hospital in crisis center work. So we get patients in the emergency department. So there are some times where I am, in terms of decision making, thinking, does it make sense for this person to necessarily go back up to the emergency department to get his labs taken? Or am I adding additional risk and burden of spread for COVID? So there's some changes in thinking. At this point for us personally, there's no shifting of deployment to work on the hospital floors and those things yet, but it might. I mean, peak isn't here yet. So, exactly. The peak's going to be coming next, week, 2-3 weeks. So, ideally, I mean, hopefully not past that. So yeah, I mean, this is an evolving story.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, Austin, it was great to speak to you. I want to leave our audience today and the listeners that are, tuning in to know how to find you. So how can people find you?
You can find me at Austin Chiang. There's an I in there. Austin Chiang MD. Basically, it's the same name across all platforms: YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. I feel like I'm leaving something out.
Every platform. Just do you have a Pinterest?
I don't have a Pinterest.
There we go. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
That's one too many.
Yeah. So Austin Chiang MD on all the platforms.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it was a pleasure to have you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me. This is really cool.
All right, guys. That's the episode today with Dr. Austin Chiang. Check him out on all the social media platforms. It's Austin Chiang MD. And if you enjoy that episode, one of the best ways to support the podcast is to leave a 5-star review. And if you are inclined, you enjoyed the episode, you want to share it with someone else, please do. All the support always helps with the podcast. We want to get great guests and provide awesome content to you. I hope you have an amazing day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Happy Doc.